Millionaire shocked to see the girl who never walked doing the incredible. Lara Smith sat in her elegant living room, the sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting soft gold patterns on the polished floors. 7 years old, pale-faced, eyes wide but distant, locked inside her own world of silence and stillness. For years, she hadn't moved beyond the wheelchair that seemed welded to her legs. No one expected anything different anymore, not in the perfect, success-driven suburb where her family lived. But today, something was different. Alan Smith, her father, a towering figure of wealth and cold control, paced nervously, his jaw clenched tight. The usual confident businessman was cracked open, raw with a mix of fear and frustration. Lara was his only daughter. His pride and endless disappointment rolled into one fragile package. He had tried everything, the best doctors, therapies, equipment, all to no avail. Watching her trapped in her motionless body was eating him all. Unlike the stiff nurses who treated Lara like a broken machine, Cindy was a whirlwind of warmth and strange ideas. She didn't see Lara as a problem to fix. She saw her as a story waiting to be told. Her laughter filled the once empty rooms like a melody. She whispered secrets to Lara's soul, coaxing tiny, trembling flexes of fingers, encouraging her to reach for colors, sounds, even dreams. It was unsettling to Alan, like watching someone tear down the walls he'd built to protect himself from pain. No one in the neighborhood believed it. How could they? The Smiths rarely showed cracks, and their daughter was known as the girl who never took a step. Rumors brewed like dark clouds until Cindy started painting that mysterious new picture. Lara exploring, questioning, daring. One afternoon, the air was thick with tension so sharp it cut. Alan stood by the window, watching. Cindy held Lara's hands, whispering gently. And then, Lara did the unthinkable. A tiny, trembling step forward. The room froze. The exquisite silence exploded with gasps. Alan's heart thundered, wild and raw. His body trembled with a cocktail of shock and disbelief. That one small, shaky step slammed into his chest like a tidal wave. He had sheltered himself behind cold control, but now, staring at his daughter's trembling legs and sparkling eyes, he felt the fierce sting of helplessness and hope battling inside. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Whispers edged with awe and fear. "Did you see that? She walked!" Impossible, or a miracle. But inside the house, the warmth Cindy brought clashed with Alan's growing dread. If Lara could step once, what if she could walk again? What would that mean for the careful, perfect image Alan had built? Would he lose control? Could he let go? The evening fell softly as Cindy and Lara sat side by side, preparing for an upcoming event, a gathering where kids like Lara would share their stories of struggle and strength. Lara's small hands traced painted leaves on a canvas, her eyes alive with something new. Hope, curiosity, maybe even courage. Alan stood on the edge, frozen in the doorway, watching, his breath caught in his throat. The moment hung like a question mark. Would he step forward with them, or retreat further into the cold shell he knew? The future was a trembling step away. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. Alan stood on the edge, frozen in the doorway, watching. The moment hung like a question mark. Would he step forward with them, or retreat further into the cold shell he knew? Lara's little fingers danced over the canvas, bright colors bursting into life. Cindy, ever the spark, chirped, "That's it, Lara. Let the world see your strength." But just then, the door swung open violently, sending a ripple of disruption through the room. It was Erin, the neighbor, her face pale, eyes wide with dread. "Alan," she shouted, breathless, "you need to see this." Alarm shot through Alan like a jolt. He fumbled to catch up with her as she rushed back out, leading him to the porch. The world outside had morphed into chaos. A cacophony of voices filled the air, frantic, urgent. "Did you hear what happened?" Erin's voice quaked. "The Johnsons, their house, it's destroyed." A knot twisted in Alan's stomach. "What do you mean?" "They found something huge." Another neighbor interjected, eyes darting. "No one knows how or why." Alan turned, the weight of horror sinking in. He glanced at the house, the chaos outside drawing him like a magnet. "We need to check." Cindy was still with Lara, the painting almost forgotten amid the uproar. They watched as Alan stepped into the maelstrom of neighbors gathering in the street, eyes wide, faces marred with disbelief. Moments felt like hours. Alan watched as more people arrived, voices growing louder, murmurs turning to shouts. "It's not just a fire, it's a whole mess of secrets, they say." Suddenly, someone yelled from the back of the crowd, "The old lady's journals! She knew things!" Alan felt the ground shift beneath him. The old woman across the street had always been strange, always seemed to know too much. "What are you talking about?" he pressed, moving closer to the source of the chaos. "They say she has been writing about the Smiths and Lara." His heart raced. The air became thick, as if time paused, frozen at the edge of a cliff. Lara, he'd spent so long keeping her hidden, trying to forget the whispers, the rumors. What did this mean? He caught glimpses of fearful expressions, darting glances towards his house. The truth pulsed under the surface like a rising tide. Could it really be that their perfect facade was a mask for something darker? In the back of his mind, fear and anger swirled violently. He had kept them all at bay with the guise of wealth and control, but now those walls were crumbling. "It's just a lie," he shouted, his voice raw. "They're all lies." But as he looked back towards the house, a shiver ran down his spine. There, in the window, Lara's gaze was fixated not on him, but on the commotion outside. Her expression was distant, yet something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Fear? Something deep within him cracked open. From the shadows of their carefully curated life, secrets began to bleed out, threatening to engulf them all. He took a step back, feeling the weight of a dawning realization. What if it wasn't just rumors? What if the truth about Lara's condition was woven into the history Alan had tried to erase? "Lara!" he screamed, panic lacing his voice. "Don't listen to them!" As the crowd surged and whispers turned into angry cries. There was a sudden silence. A gasp spread like wildfire, eyes drawn towards the painted window where Lara still stood, seemingly poised at the edge of discovery. But what would she discover? And what would it mean for Alan? The future was a trembling step away, but now it was fraught with new dangers, revealing shadows lurking just beneath the surface. The future was a trembling step away, but now it was fraught with new dangers, revealing shadows lurking just beneath the surface. Alan watched the neighbors' faces shift from shock to curiosity, eyes darting towards the window where Lara still stood. The whispers in the crowd grew louder, questions rising like smoke. What kind of secrets could the old lady's journals hold? And why had they been hidden for so long? For a heartbeat, the world outside faded. All Alan could see were Lara's eyes, wide and shimmering, searching his for answers he didn't have. "Lara!" he shouted again, but the words slipped from his mouth like so much sand. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone shouted, "Her voice! Lara's voice!" Gasps rippled through the neighbors. A murmur of disbelief followed. The realization radiated outward like shockwaves. Could she really speak? Alan's heart raced. He pushed through the crowd, desperation driving him. "No, don't!" But his plea dissolved into fear as he heard it. A soft sound that sent chills racing down his spine. "Dad." The word hung in the air, heavy with everything it meant. Nearby, Cindy turned, eyes wide, hovering between shock and pride. "Oh my God," Alan breathed. The weight of his own expectations crashing down like a brick wall. Lara had broken through, she was breaking free. But what had she broken free from? All he could do was stand frozen. Lara's gaze shifted from the window back to him, taking in his disbelief. The tender connection of father and daughter pulsed between them, a lifeline in a storm. Then, without warning, the air crackled and a figure burst from the back of the gathering. It was Kevin, the self-professed gossip of the neighborhood, waving an old, fraying book high above his head. "I found it," he yelled, panting. "The journal, the truth about all of us." The crowd was drawn to him, like moths to a flame. Kevin flipped it open, frantically scanning the pages. "This is it. The old lady. She wrote it all. About Lara." Alan's stomach twisted, a knot tightening so harshly he could hardly breathe. With every word Kevin shouted, the crowd's anticipation morphed into dread. Alan felt the walls closing in, his heart pounding a frantic beat in his chest. "Lara's not what you think. She's not just the girl who can't walk. She's special." The crowd fell silent. Alan took a step back, confusion thick in the air. "What do you mean special?" he spat, desperation crawling into his voice. "What else is there?" Kevin looked at him wide-eyed. "She was cursed, but she can break it. The journal says she's one of the last." But before he could finish, a horrendous crash echoed through the neighborhood. A house crumbling, a loud crack of wood and glass. Alan spun around to see his own home shuddering, walls buckling. The sound of screaming mingled with the collapse. Neighbors surged forward, clutching each other, panic painting their faces. Alan's heart raced. "We have to go inside." But just before he reached for the door, he caught a glimpse of Lara again. She wasn't crying, she wasn't scared. Her lips turned upward in a knowing smile. A flicker of power shone in her eyes, something raw and ancient. In that moment, Alan understood. This was no ordinary girl. The house teetered as gray dust filled the air, like an unholy fog. In the chaos, Alan's world crumbled alongside his home. What had he hidden? What invisible chains held them all captive? And as Lara remained unmoved, a question wrapped itself around his heart. Had she always been the key? Had he been trying to protect her, or himself? The future had never been so uncertain. Alan stood frozen, heart racing as the house trembled, dust swirling like ghosts around him. It felt as if time had slowed, the cries and gasps of the crowd echoing through the air. Then Lara's voice broke through the chaos, a whisper of hope amid the storm. "Dad." If that single word could ignite a spark of courage, what else could she do? But just then, an ear-splitting crack ripped through the sky, a loud, sickening pop. Alan flinched, panic shooting through him like electricity. He turned back, fear gripping his chest, just in time to see a massive beam of the house above buckle. Time seemed to hold its breath as he watched it fall. "No!" he shouted, lunging forward, desperate to reach her. In that moment, everything felt fragile, like glass teetering on the edge, but the world beneath him erupted in chaos. The crowd surged, pushing back as debris rained down, crashing into the ground like thunder. "Get back! Get back!" someone screamed, but Alan was already moving. He barely felt Kevin's hand on his arm, trying to pull him away, the words drowned out by the noise. Lara stood there, frozen, eyes wide with both fear and defiance. Alan's mind raced as he thought of her, unprotected in that room. He couldn't let her see the fear on his face. "Lara, come to me!" he yelled, voice breaking as if it could cut through the calamity. But before she could take a step, the dust parted like curtains, revealing chaos beyond the windows. All at once, an image struck him, a shadow beyond her, a figure lingering in the corner of the room. "Lara, watch out!" he shouted, his voice rising above the din, but it was too late. A figure stepped into the fading light, cloaked in shadow, the outlines of a woman with long, wispy hair. "Lara!" Her voice was soft, but it held a weight that hung in the air, electrifying every nerve in Alan's body. "You need to remember who you are." The words hung heavy, filled with strange familiarity amidst the chaos. Alan's heart raced with dread. Who are you?" he yelled, his whole being trembling, caught between the collapsing house and the impossible woman in front of him. The crowd around Alan quieted abruptly, eyes drawn to the figure like moths to a flame. Whispers rippled through them, confusion and disbelief painting their faces. He felt their judgment, their gazes piercing, demanding answers he didn't have. "Do you really want to know?" she replied, a mischievous glint in her gaze. The room shifted, the light dimmed, shadows stretching and warping like problems coming to life. "Your daughter holds the answers and the power." Alan recoiled, rage and fear intertwined, twisting in his gut. "Power? What do you mean?" He thought of Lara and how helpless he felt. The walls he'd built to keep them safe, now closing in on them. "Everything you've hidden can't remain buried. It's time to face the truth." The woman lifted her hand, fingers flickering with an unearthly glow, illuminating Lara's small face in the dark. And then something happened. In an instant, a violent rush of energy surged through the room, glass exploding, light erupting, bright and blinding. Alan threw his arms up, shielding his eyes, his heart hammering wildly. Around him, the crowd gasped, the fear palpable, a shared collective shock that bonded them for an instant. When he dared to look again, his heart plummeted. Lara was no longer alone. Shadows mingled with her, swirling and coiling around her small form, brushing against her like long-lost friends. "Lara!" he cried, voice raw, desperate. But it was too late. She was transforming, an aura of brilliance surrounding her, a radiance that echoed the legend he feared. The whispers surged again. Confusion morphed into disbelief. "She's one of them?" The words felt like knives, slicing through the atmosphere. Alan's whole world tilted on its axis. What had he done? What had he kept from her? In that moment, everything he thought he knew shattered. The figure stepped closer, her gaze locking onto Alan's, deep and knowing. "She is the key, Alan. There was never a curse." All Alan could do was stand, paralyzed as the truth began to rise, like smoke from the ashes of a crumbled facade. What lay ahead could change everything, and nothing would ever be the same. "Lara!" he yelled again. But now, beneath the shadows, a new journey was beginning. His daughter, a farce of nature, untethered and raw. The crowd's fear melded into something else. Were they watching a miracle? Or a disaster waiting to unfold? As Lara took her first steps into the light, Alan felt the threads of fate twisting tighter around them all. The future loomed ahead, uncertain and vast. What had they unleashed? What would it cost? Lara stood in the doorway, shadows dancing around her, light flickering like hope ignited. The air was electric, charged with a blend of fear and anticipation. Neighbors in the crowd stared in awe, mouths agape, eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding. Alan felt a chill run down his spine as uncertainty swirled within him. He watched his daughter, her small frame wrapped in mystery and untapped potential. But just as the collective breath of the crowd hung in suspense, the atmosphere shifted. There was a stillness, a pause before the storm, and then the figure moving among the shadows spoke again. "Lara," she commanded softly, each syllable resonating like a chime. "You need to understand the power within you." Alan's heart raced. Power? What did that even mean? He struggled to catch up with the whirlwind of emotions surrounding them, trying to comprehend what was happening. Lara looked at the woman, and for a moment Alan saw something profound flicker in her eyes. It was a connection, ancient and profound, but then just as quickly, confusion clouded her face. Who are you?" Lara stammered, her voice cracking like tense piano strings. "Remember," the figure urged, moving closer, her lips curling into a gentle smile. "You've been waiting for this moment." But before anyone could react, a deafening roar erupted from the distance, the sound like a whip crack. It filled the air with dread, a shadow creeping over the gathering. Alan turned, anxiety flooding him as instinct screamed that danger was brewing. The sky darkened abruptly. Clouds churned menacingly, a storm conjuring up from nowhere. People began to step back, whispers of fear spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "What's happening?" someone shouted, panic lacing their voice. Then, without warning, a bolt of lightning pierced through the heavens, striking the ground just a few yards away from them. The earth trembled, sending tremors rippling beneath Alan's feet. That single flash illuminated everyone's faces, stark and white, showing raw terror. As the dust settled, a wild wind swirled around them. Alan scanned the crowd, eyes desperate. But then his gaze snapped back to Lara. She stood tall, unwavering, as if the torrent around her was merely a gentle breeze. The shadows wrapped tighter around her, swirling like a protective barrier. "Lara," he shouted, fear amplifying the sound of her name. But she didn't flinch. Instead, her expression turned resolute, eyes fierce with a flicker of something he had never seen before. "Dad, I can feel it." Lara's voice was clear and unwavering now, like glass cutting through the chaos. "I can break the chains. I can." And just as the air thickened with tension, a scream pierced through, the source drawing everyone's attention. Alan's heart dropped as he turned to see Erin, his neighbor, collapsing to the ground, clutching her chest as if the life was being sucked out of her. "No, someone help her," he yelled, racing towards her. But then, gasps erupted from the people still standing, their faces pale against the darkening sky. Alan froze. They weren't staring at Erin anymore. They were focused higher, pointing. Murmurs turned into shouts. Amid the chaos, the old woman from across the street suddenly appeared in the shadows. "It begins," she whispered cryptically, eyes glinting with a knowing that twisted Alan's gut. The crowd turned back towards Lara, uncertainty morphing into fear. "No, don't look at her," Alan yelled, but it was too late. Lara lifted her arm, fingers outstretched toward the swirling shadows above. And something shifted. Without warning, a piercing laughter erupted, the kind that roots itself deep in your bones, a sound utterly out of place. The figure, the supposed protector, tilted her head back, laughter rolling out in waves, transforming into something chilling. "This is just the beginning," she cackled. And suddenly, the warm glow surrounding Lara flickered like an old candle blown by the wind. Alan's blood ran cold as realization hit him. The woman wasn't the guardian. She was the harbinger. Shadows screamed and withdrew, and the clouds swirled ominously, cutting through any lingering light. Lara's eyes widened in horror, fear mounting in her small frame. What's happening? Alan felt the ground shake, a new threat awakening beneath him. Relationships shattered in an instant. The fleeting connection he fought so hard to protect now hung by a thread. In that heartbeat, everything flipped. The world morphed. Friendship turned into fear, love into doubt. What had Lara unleashed? And worse, who was the woman who held the key to all their fates? The path ahead was riddled with uncertainty, the storm clouds gathering like secrets poised to pour. He felt a void open before him, teetering on the edge of devastation, and something darker. Would they survive the truth? And would I ever see his daughter's light again? Lara stood in the doorway, shadows dancing around her, light flickering like hope ignited. The air was electric, charged with a blend of fear and anticipation. Neighbors in the crowd stared in awe, mouths agape, eyes glued to the spectacle unfolding. Alan felt a chill run down his spine as uncertainty swirled within him. He watched his daughter, her small frame wrapped in mystery and untapped potential. But just as the collective breath of the crowd hung in suspense, the atmosphere shifted. There was a stillness, a pause before the storm, and then the figure moving among the shadows spoke again. "Lara," she commanded softly, each syllable resonating like a chime. "You need to understand the power within you." Alan's heart raced. Power? What did that even mean? He struggled to catch up with the whirlwind of emotions surrounding them, trying to comprehend what was happening. Lara looked at the woman, and for a moment, Alan saw something profound flicker in her eyes. It was a connection, ancient and profound. But then, just as quickly, confusion clouded her face. Who are you?" Lara stammered, her voice cracking like tense piano strings. "Remember," the figure urged, moving closer, her lips curling into a gentle smile. "You've been waiting for this moment." But before anyone could react, a deafening roar erupted from the distance, the sound like a whip crack. It filled the air with dread, a shadow creeping over the gathering. Alan turned, anxiety flooding him as instinct screamed that danger was brewing. The sky darkened abruptly. Clouds churned menacingly, a storm conjuring up from nowhere. People began to step back, whispers of fear spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "What's happening?" someone shouted, panic lacing their voice. Then, without warning, a bolt of lightning pierced through the heavens, striking the ground just a few yards away from them. The earth trembled, sending tremors rippling beneath Alan's feet. That single flash illuminated everyone's faces, stark and white, showing raw terror. As the dust settled, a wild wind swirled around them. Alan scanned the crowd, eyes desperate, but then his gaze snapped back to Lara. She stood tall, unwavering, as if the torrent around her was merely a gentle breeze. The shadows wrapped tighter around her, swirling like protective barriers. "Lara," he shouted, fear amplifying the sound of her name. But she didn't flinch. Instead, her expression turned resolute, eyes fierce with a flicker of something he had never seen before. "Dad, I can feel it." Lara's voice was clear and unwavering now, like glass cutting through the chaos. "I can break the chains. I can." Before she could finish, a sudden scream sliced through the air. "Help! Someone help!" Aaron, his neighbor, crumpled to the ground, clutching her chest. Panic surged through Alan. "No! Aaron!" He lunged forward. But the crowd erupted into chaos as people screamed and scrambled backward. Then came a deafening clap of thunder. Alan's heart raced. But as he turned back toward Lara, what he saw made his blood run cold. The shadowy figure loomed larger, its form stretching grotesquely, merging with the gathering storm. The laughter turned sinister, echoing like a death knell. "This is what you've unleashed," the figure cried, voice booming. "The power was never hers alone. It was always a part of your bloodline, Alan." His heart plunged. "What do you mean?" The revelation hit him like a slap. "What bloodline?" The figure laughed louder, as if his confusion delighted her. "You think you're protecting her. You've kept her shackled to your fear. You will suffer the consequences of her awakening, and the truth of who you are." Before Alan could grasp the words, lightning struck again, illuminating the crowd in blinding white. In that moment of chaos, he saw Lara, a bright light against the encroaching darkness. But something flickered behind her, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "Dad, help me!" Lara screamed, arms outstretched. But the shadows surged, enveloping her in a restless dance. "No!" Alan shouted, hands reaching out, but he was held back by invisible chains. The crowd murmured, bewildered. As the shadows clawed around Lara, the figure whispered, "You've always known that your past would return, and now it's time to embrace your legacy." Alan felt a weight crash through him. Devastating revelations, hidden truths, and a legacy wrapped in darkness. With every trembling breath, doubt seeped into his bones. "What legacy?" he demanded, but the storm howled and drowned his words. And just as darkness threatened to swallow them whole, Lara's voice pierced through the chaos. "I can't hold it back." In that terrifying moment, the light surrounding her flickered violently, and the world spun like a nightmare. The ground shook. Alan stumbled as realization crashed down like falling debris. His daughter held the power to break a curse, a legacy woven into their very souls. But now that power was spiraling out of control. "Lara, hold on!" he yelled. But beneath his panic lay a creeping fear that he had never truly known her at all. The shadows tightened. The storm raged, and with one last deafening crack of thunder, everything faded into blinding light. When it cleared, everything had changed. Lara was gone. Alan's breath caught. "No, no, no!" He looked around frantically, but she was nowhere. The crowd was lost in shocked silence, staring as if being drawn into an abyss. And in that moment, he realized the terrifying truth. What he thought he understood about his daughter, about himself, was about to be unraveled forever. Lara was gone. Alan's heart felt like it was torn from his chest. The crowd held their breath, eyes wide, mouths slightly open in disbelief. He stood alone in the pressure of silence, every heartbeat echoing in his ears. No, no, no. Panic clawed at him, tightening around his throat like a noose. He scanned the faces of the crowd, seeking any clue. Where was she? The shadows that once surrounded her now faded, leaving him feeling colder than ever. "Where is my daughter?" he shouted, desperation cracking his voice. The neighbors still stared, rooted to the ground like trees in winter, their expressions a mix of fear and confusion. And then the woman, the shadowy figure, the harbinger of chaos, began to laugh. It was the kind of laugh that sent chills down spines, a sound that echoed deep in the bones. "She's not lost, Alan. She's become what she was meant to be." Her words dripped with malice, turning the air thick with dread. "What are you talking about?" Alan demanded, his hands trembling with urgency. He felt like a ship about to capsize in a storm. "What have you done to her?" "Done?" she replied, voice dripping with mockery. "I merely opened the door you locked tight. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when tied to blood." "Your blood." A collective gasp rocked through the crowd. Eyes darted between Alan and the figure, fear morphing into speculative wonder. They were starting to whisper, tensions rising, questions flooding the air. "Alan," someone murmured, "what is she talking about?" Words felt like stones in his throat. He wanted to scream at them, to tell them it wasn't true, but a nagging thought pulled at him deep inside. What if it was? What truths had he buried in the shadows? Power, legacy, the words whispered through the crowd, uncertainty taking root in their minds. Is it true? The woman stepped closer, her shadow stretching over Alan. "You've hidden her from the truth all her life, but it's not just her. It's you too. You've been chosen." Her smile twisted into something menacing, eyes flashing with knowledge. Then, as if the air itself had split open, a blinding light erupted around them. It felt like the sun had burst through a gray sky. Alan shielded his eyes, and just as quickly as it came, the light flickered, then vanished. What remained was a crater of silence. But there, in the heart of the gathering chaos, stood Lara. She was back, radiant, glowing, but surrounded by a swirling mass of energy that pulsed as if alive. And then, something shifted. Suddenly, Lara looked at Alan, her small body trembling. "Dad, I can't control it." "What?" Panic surged again. The world felt unsteady, like the floor beneath him was crumbling. The crowd watched, jaws slack, eyes wide with horror as they felt the energy shift. Then, without warning, a loud crack echoed. An actual split appeared in the pavement beneath them, fissures spreading like cracks in fragile glass. Gasps filled the air, voices merging into a clamor of panic. "Run!" someone shouted. But Alan didn't move. He couldn't. "Lara!" he cried out, reaching for her, but something tugged him back. That energy coiled around him, electrifying and heavy, pulling him away. In that brief heartbeat, he saw the truth reflected in Lara's eyes. It was a spark, a recognition that seemed to shake the very earth. "Dad, you have to believe me," she shouted, voice carrying through the chaos. "You're part of this too. You always were." Then the ground beneath them quaked violently, and shadows erupted from the cracks, swirling around, consuming everything in sight. Panic surged and spread like wildfire. People ran, but there was nowhere to escape. Alan felt himself pulled back into the dark, and yet something within him clicked. Maybe the shadows weren't just danger. Maybe they were answers. Truth started flooding in, revelations clawing at his mind like claws digging through dirt. "Lara!" He reached for her again. But when his hand brushed against hers, the connection sent a shockwave through him. It was an awakening, a revelation, a bond beyond blood. "What did you bring back?" the figure whispered, her gaze piercing through all pretenses. In that chaos of shadows and light, Alan realized something terrible, something profound. The darkness was not just out there, it was also within him. The legacy he tried to conceal wasn't only about Lara, it was about him too. And as they stood at the precipice of the unknown, enveloped in the storm of their fates, a raw scream echoed through the air, his own. Alan's world had just shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Lara was back, radiant, glowing, but surrounded by a swirling mass of energy that pulsed as if alive. The shadowy figure loomed larger, laughter echoing like thunder. Alan felt the pressure of fear wash over him, squeezing his chest tighter, making it hard to breathe. The crowd was panicking, bodies shuffling in chaos, but all he could focus on was Lara and the tumult brewing around her. "Stay away from her," he shouted, but his voice seemed lost in the cacophony. The shadows coiled around Lara, and Alan could see the uncertainty flickering in her ear. "Lara, please, just hold on." "Dad, I can't," she shouted back, tears glistening on her cheeks. "It's too much." Then, something shifted. A powerful energy rippled through the air, vibrated in the ground beneath him. It felt like a heartbeat, strong and unyielding. Alan's breath caught as he watched Lara, her little frame trembling against the onslaught. Lighting danced around her, but she stood firm, defiant. Suddenly, the figure stepped forward, shadows swirling around her, a storm of chaos erupting into the air. You think you can protect her? The truth is here, and it will unleash a force far beyond your comprehension. With a flick of her wrist, the energy erupted outward, blinding light and dark shadows crashing together in a cacophony of sound. Alan felt the pull, a force binding him to the ground. It was overwhelming. Then it happened. A massive shockwave erupted, knocking everyone off their feet. Alan's heart raced as he flew backward, sprawling against the hard pavement. The world blurred. Shadows and light tangled like ribbons in a winter wind. "Lara!" he heard the distant cry, but it was like shouting into a void. Everything turned upside down as something inside him shattered. The energy coalesced, enveloping Lara in a haze, and then he saw her flickering. It wasn't just light, it was something deeper, something ancient. And in that moment, a truth he couldn't fathom slammed into him. The shadows receded into her being, merging with her very essence. The figure spoke again, her voice echoing over the crowd. "You thought you could keep her hidden, but she is more than just a girl. She's the last beacon of a power that belonged to your family long before you." "No!" Alan cried out, fighting against the weight of fear pressing down on him. But the world spun again. The shadows surged, pulling Alan into a vision, a flash of past lives. His heart ached, memories flashing before his eyes. The lives of ancestors, long burned out, their regrets danced around him. He saw whispers of old secrets, dark truths he'd buried deep, and then everything went black. When the darkness faded, Alan could see again. But he was not where he stood moments before. The crowd was gone. Lara was gone. It was just him, standing in a void, wrapped in swirling shadows. The figure lingered nearby, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Welcome to the truth, Alan," she whispered, every word dripping with malice. "You did this. You brought her to this brink." Panic clawed deep inside him. "What are you talking about?" Her laughter echoed, a cruel melody that twisted his insides. "You think you've protected her, buried her past? You know nothing about your lineage. It's time you acknowledge the reality. You and Lara are not just father and daughter. You are the last of the Kinley line." The weight of her words crashed down on him. Kinley. The name resonated. Legends swirled. Stories of old magic, of a cursed bloodline that should have been forgotten. Bitterness and pain twisted like knots in his stomach, tying him to a fate he had fought to evade. "That cannot be," he breathed, understanding dawning painfully. "Oh, it is," she said softly, "and now you must make a choice. Will you embrace it, or will you lose her forever?" Before he could respond, the shadows thinned and brightened, revealing fragments of things he never wanted to see. The lives lost, the choices made. Each piece floated by, spectral memories whispering regrets. Alan's heart raced. No, Lara, but he was alone, stuck amidst echoes of the past. The price of ignoring the truth had never been so high. He felt it, more than just fear. He felt his very soul unraveling, a thread pulled tight, about to snap, and for the first time, he questioned everything he knew. The truth was relentless, waiting. When it came, would he have the strength to face it, or was it already too late? Alan stood in the swirling shadows, dread coiling tighter around his heart as the woman's laughter echoed ominously in the void. "You've hidden too much," she taunted, her voice sharp like a knife cutting through the chaos. "And now your daughter's fate is tangled with your own." The realization was suffocating, wrapping around him like a vice. "What do you mean? What fate?" he gasped, desperation clawing at his throat. The figure grinned, her presence overwhelming as the shadows peeled back to reveal flickering images, fragments of past lives, memories shimmering like broken glass. Alan saw himself as a child, warm laughter echoing in a sunlit garden. But then it twisted dark, shouts, fear, shadows chasing him through memories he wished to forget. "Stop it!" he shouted, instinctively recoiling from the images. But the woman didn't stop. "You thought you could erase the truth," she hissed. "The darkness lasts, Alan." The world around him surged with energy, a violent pulse of power. Each heartbeat vibrated like a drum, every breath heavy. Lara, where was Lara? His chest tightened as he spun around, looking for her in the emptiness. Her absence was palpable, an ache sharper than anything he'd ever experienced. And then, a crack, sharp and electric. The ground trembled beneath him. Fissures spreading, the air thick with tension. "No!" he screamed, fear slicing through him as dark tendrils snaked towards him, shadows reaching hungrily for his form. Then, there was a blinding flash, a burst of light against the darkness. Alan shielded his eyes, blinking away stars in the afterimage. When he could see again, he gasped. The woman had vanished, leaving only swirling shadows. And there stood Lara, bathed in strange light, her hands crackling with energy. "Lara," he croaked, stumbling toward her, but she was different, eyes fierce, illuminated by that spark of power. "Dad," she called, voice clear, but with an edge of fear. "I feel it, the connection, it's overwhelming." "Don't fight it, sweetheart." Every instinct screamed to reach her, to pull her back. The shadows writhed. "You're strong." But suddenly, something shifted in Lara's expression. Fear turned to recognition. "Wait, Dad, you have to let go," her voice cracked. Before he could react, the air around them thickened, a dark mist swirling with purpose. A wave of dread crashed through him. Then, an unexpected sound, a roar, primal and ancient. The ground shuddered up into a violent shake. A massive entity emerged, colossal and horrific, bursting through the shadows, reshaping everything. Alan's breath caught. It was like something from a nightmare, a distorted version of all his fears combined. The crowd, he thought of their faces, lost in despair. "Run," he shouted, but his words drowned in the chaos. The monstrous figure howled, a sound that twisted Alan's insides. And then, a revelation crashed in, a blinding flash of recognition. All the tales he'd dismissed as folklore, all the warnings he'd ignored, came rushing back. "No," he whispered, as shadows clawed at his memories, pulling from him old secrets buried deep. This wasn't just about Lara, it was about him too. This was his curse, and now it was hers. With that realization came the weight of shame. The beast screamed again, and Alan felt the pain seeping through him, wrapping around his heart like barbed wire. "Lara!" he cried, panic flooding him, desperation fueling every word. "You have to fight!" In that instant, the ground cracked beneath them, and the creature lunged forward. But then, Lara raised her hand, and everything froze. Time stood still, as if the world held its breath. Light flickered around her, and within that moment, Alan saw the truth. His daughter wasn't just fighting for her life. She was fighting for the souls of every ancestor before them. "Please, Lara," he breathed, thoughts racing. All he had tried to protect, all his fears boiled down to this. One moment that could change everything. Then, just as suddenly, an explosion. The energy surged, tearing through the air. The monstrous shadow screeched, and Alan's vision blurred as the walls of the world around him began to crumble, revealing the underlying chaos and despair. It all spun together, and just as Alan reached out, something shifted. The air filled with a desperate plea. "Who are you?" Lara cried, but the figure shifted, a familiar voice intertwined with darkness. Lara, I've been waiting for you. The heart-stopping truth hung in the air. A face emerged from the shadows, someone Alan recognized, someone he never expected. Mom? Lara's voice cracked as the world spiraled downward, the ground shaking, pulling them into a void. A truth he never saw coming was now unraveling before his eyes. Your mother lives. The shadows screamed together, and Alan felt the weight of his entire existence shift. The past was rising up, ready to engulf them both, leaving behind uncertainty, questions, and the darkness that could consume them all. In that moment, Alan realized the fight was only just beginning. As the air crackled with tension, Alan felt the world shift around him. Lara stood strong, the light within her illuminating the shock on everyone's faces. The shadows clawed at the edges of the light, but she held her ground, radiating a strength Alan hadn't seen before. "Mom," Lara called, voice rising with urgency. The figure, who momentarily resembled some lost part of his past, stepped closer. Fear surged through Alan, but something deeper pulsated in Lara's presence. A connection, stronger than blood, coursed between them. "Trust her," Alan heard himself say, the words spilling out like a prayer. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The shadows writhed, but within them, Alan could see a flicker in Lara's eyes, a hint of defiance and determination. "We're not afraid of you," she declared, her voice clear and unwavering. With a fierce gesture, Lara extended her hand toward the figure. Energy surged, illuminating the dark surroundings. "Stop," the figure shouted, panic lacing her tone. "You don't know what you're doing." But Lara pressed on, drawing strength from the connection pulsing between her and Alan. "I will not be bound by fear," she shouted, and as she did, the shadows recoiled, their hold starting to weaken. Suddenly, a wave of light poured forth from Lara, surrounding them all. The shadows shrieked in agony, breaking apart, dissipating into harmless wisps of smoke. Alan felt the clutch of dread ease, a warmth washing over him as he saw faces of the crowd finally shift from terror to awe. "It's happening!" someone exclaimed, and the collective breath they'd been holding released in unison, a whisper of hope threading through their shock. Together, father and daughter stood, arms outstretched, bound by their shared strength. The figure, now nothing more than a fading echo, recoiled into the darkness, her laughter replaced by silence. Then it fell quiet, a stillness enveloping them like a blanket. Alan's heart raced, each beat pulsing with new life as he turned to Lara. "You did it. You really did it." Lara's eyes sparkled, but they were filled with unspent energy, the remnants of a battle fought. "We did it, Dad. I can feel everything. It's so powerful." And in that moment, they both knew. They had faced a darkness that could have consumed them, but together they had triumphed. The shadows lay vanquished, their spirits liberated, and for the first time, Lara's future glowed brightly ahead of her. As the crowd slowly emerged from their paralysis, they began to cheer, clapping with relief and joy. "You're extraordinary," someone yelled. "Both of you." Alan's heart soared as he embraced Lara, feeling the strength radiating from her. Their journey was only just beginning, but together they could dive into the unknown with hope instead of fear. "Let's go home, kiddo," he whispered. As they turned to leave the remnants of chaos behind, he realized something profound. There would always be mysteries, shadows lurking at the edges, but they would face them together. And as they walked hand in hand toward their future, Alan felt a lightness lift his spirit. A new legacy was being written, brighter than he ever imagined. Remember, dear viewers, this is not the end. You must subscribe now to catch every twist and turn in our next exclusive adventure. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and let everyone discover this story. Flood that comment section with your thoughts and theories. What do you think happens next? And don't wait one more second. Share this with at least 5 friends who need to know this ending. Your sup.